Well, I'm not going to try and say it out loud. We watched DDLJ, and yeah, but the latest in our Bollywood Virgins series. I'll be honest with you. After watching enough of these, I think I'm kind of getting a thing for Indian chicks. Um, there's some pretty girls in these things, but
She is very pretty. I will
there's a
say
lot.
that. Very
Yeah,
pretty. Both
if you
both of
haven't,
them.
yeah, if you haven't
Hey,
watched a lot
peak of
of,
their powers, you know.
Yeah.
if you haven't watched a lot of or any Bollywood movies, beware. You will become very attracted to Indian beauty. Um, it happened. It's happening. Look at that. Wow.
That's a terrible shot of her. Her eyes like halfway closed. But she's very pretty.
I'm into it.
I mean, these were shot on film, right? So like you don't know
Yeah.
what you have until you look at the daily. So there was a different process of
Yeah.
how you go about making movies than a lot of movies today.
She's not even my favorite. I'm just noticing like
Oh, Preeti was really pretty.
all of
Preeti.
my
Yeah.
all of these.
Were you talking about her
screenings I've just
sister?
No, I'm just
Not her sister, her betrothed sister, Preeti. That was her name, right?
Or sister-in-law, I guess you would call her that.
I mean,
right?
they didn't get married, but like,
yeah.
yeah.
Or
It's
to-be
like
sister.
essentially,
Yeah.
yeah, she was really pretty too.
Yes. I do remember. I
So-
think I know the person. Isn't she the one in the song that's on the rooftop and she's sort of the one
Yeah.
dancing in the Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
what you're
yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, she's gorgeous.
So
This was our sort of a love story for us.
Yeah.
It's one of the most popular, successful movies of Bollywood history. Is that right?
that is right. Fun fact. I mean, Angelina, you actually read the article about this earlier. How do you feel about the fact that now that article was published in November 2020 when the theaters were first opening after the initial wave of the pandemic, and already at that time when the theaters had closed down earlier in 2020, DDLJ Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, which basically translates to the brave-hearted will take the bride.
Can you say that one
movie
more
had been-
time?
Huh?
Can you say that again?
The
I haven't actually
brave,
heard that name out loud.
the brave. Oh, the name of the movie or the English translation?
Yeah. No, the name of the movie.
Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge.
Oh yeah, I'd never actually gotten
One
to
of the
hear
songs
name
in
of
the movie
out loud. I
is-
was like, wow.
The name of the movie. So if I don't know how if
okay.
you listen to the song, it's there's a titular song in the movie. But yeah, there's this theater called Marathi Mandir, which basically
Mhm.
stands for Marathi. Mandir is like a temple. That's what that translates to. Marathi is like a language, and then but the theater is in Mumbai, which is where Bollywood is
Yeah.
based. That theater has been playing this movie since it came out in October 20th, I think, 1995, which I did the math is exactly
Literally,
nine.
it's on like a.
I was gonna say
How much?
this movie came out exactly 9.5 months after I was born. I was born on January
Oh
5th,
wow,
1995.
that's crazy.
And this movie came out October 20th. So like as long as I've been alive,
so
basically
funny.
this movie has been around.
You've been
But this
watching
movie in late 2020, when it was first starting to play again after those theaters reopened from the pandemic shutdowns, it had already played consecutively like for 1,274 something weeks in
It
theaters.
was 1,247
Yeah.
weeks, and it's the first show. They said in the article that it's the first show that they play as the first matinee showing every day, and they're going to continue with the tradition. The only reason they shut down and stopped that said tradition was because of COVID, and it was unsafe, and so they had to shut down the theaters. But the second they reopened, it was the first show they show every single day they're open.
Well,
And it's still
Crazy.
playing.
Yeah.
And they've done these
Yeah,
special
it's still
events
going.
like when it crossed 700 weeks, when it crossed 1,000 weeks, and then Shahrukh Khan and Kajol would show up and they do this special like almost
Yeah.
red carpet event, and then like thousands of people gather on the streets, and then they commemorate it with some kind of special ceremony of some kind, or like they released a coffee table book at the 700th anniversary, I think. There's all kinds of like literature written about what this movie means for cinema and like critiquing how it influenced Bollywood over time. But just the fact, I mean, it's kind of like the closest comparison to this in Hollywood would be the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which still
Mhm.
plays in a lot
Yeah.
of theaters. I don't know if it's consecutive weeks, but for 26, it's still
No,
playing.
but
You can
yeah.
go to Marathi. If you go to Mumbai, you can go to that theater and catch that showing even to this day. That's
Yeah.
I
insane
wouldn't-
to think about, right? I mean,
in in a way where I try not to be disrespectful, as I've been coined before, I can see where this movie did a lot for the culture. They speak to a lot as like sort of women being expected to do this certain thing within Indian culture. Obviously, arranged marriages was a huge part and still is. I think today, Daniel, I could be wrong, but it's still today very prominent, which is crazy to sort of the
there
Western
is less
world.
of a stigma around it in the sense that back then it was more like forced onto kids and women and men in general, but like women especially.
But it's still like a cultural norm to a certain part, which for me sounds absolutely crazy, but that's because I grew up in a Western world where like my mom came from Europe, and I grew up thinking like, you have no say in who I marry, lady. I have my own autonomy. But that's not bred and like born in the culture. So I can see how this movie really speaks to sort of paramount choices for a character, like getting to choose who she loves, but still wanting to do right by her family. But overall, this movie was so terrible, like awful. The fight scene, the movie, the music, I'm just like, I don't understand the cult following of this movie unless it's about all of the cultural stuff, because as a movie overall, wow. I literally watched this with a friend and we kept looking at each other and said, make it make sense. At some point, talking about VFX, there's this light on the roof specifically. There's this light. It almost looks like an alien UFO. And then it would flash in and out. And we were like, oh my God, it's gone. It's back. It's gone.
They shot a lot of that was shot in a studio, like a soundstage. You could clearly tell it is.
I guarantee you,
and
it was like a reflection or something. Yeah. So there are mistakes made with stunts. Like he fell over, but that dude hadn't even hit him yet. Like it's so bad.
The stunt work, I'll be honest with you, like this movie is not known for that third act action sequence, which is barely an action sequence. And I don't think it held up even when the movie came out. But people don't really remember that. What people remember is the scene where, Simran's running to catch Raj as he's extending his hand on the train. That scene, that particular sequence became so iconic and so symbolic for like that break from tradition.
There was an opening on the train
right
next to her that she could have jumped into without running like an idiot. Like, what? Like, that's how trains work. They're connected on the inside. So I was just like, wow, they built all of this up for the train scene. But honestly, like, they shouldn't have shown the open door right next to her. Like, that's just a big directorial, like, flop.
I think the idea is you're thinking more about the sentiment of that rather than the logic of it.
But
it's the whole thing of
so hard for me to surpass that because the logic of the way the movie was made just doesn't make sense.
Didn't I told you guys this last week, and I think we kind of went in a different direction than what I intended. But when I said this movie very much is like a Romeo and Juliet story, I meant it more like not only thematically, like it follows a lot of the same like plot devices, like with these two people from two very different cultural backgrounds, even though they're both technically Indian. One of them lives in London and is very like different than the other. Like they're both actually technically from London, but one of them is this very traditional, like conservative background. The other one much more liberal, like westernized culture background, if you want to call it that. And then the father of the daughter like does not want them to get together, and that's like the big antagonistic force. Yeah. Nobody really dies at the end of this movie, so it's not the tragedy. But that's kind of what I meant. Not only that, but also the cultural value, and also from a storytelling standpoint, this movie set really not only a tradition, but like this pattern where a lot of these other movies tried to follow this like way of storytelling to the point that when you watch Romeo and Juliet for the first time today, and you've seen all these other movies that are sort of like following the story structure that Romeo and Juliet set at the beginning with Shakespeare, you're like, I've seen this before. This is not what is so original and great about Romeo and Juliet. That's
that's been so many iterations of Romeo and Juliet, right? Like I can totally see that, but we've seen
it's so
time and time again.
No. You're not gonna tell me that Shakespeare doesn't hold up Shakespeare is a classic. Shakespeare is Shakespeare.
I
And it's not,
still,
if you are looking at it in terms of just the love story between Romeo and Juliet, that is so superficial and doesn't take into account all of the work he put into building the world and all of the characters with different subplots, the things that you could read into every character, every line. Don't tell me that Shakespeare is just people are repeating Shakespeare. Nobody is repeating Shakespeare.
They all are.
They're
That because
they
that's
are-
an archetype now. Like
they are-
Shakespeare has its own
It is,
sort of
it's,
like
yeah, it's archetype.
he has
but
created
it's
an archetype that people then go on to reiterate. That is
Isn't
what
that
they're
I'm
what
saying.
reiterating
Titanic is?
it, and they're
Titanic is
scanning.
Romeo and Juliet. In
They're
fact,
scanning
like
the
Yeah,
details,
Jack dies
though.
in the end. It's
Yes,
Romeo-
but
Yeah.
they're scanning for the most superficial reading of it and putting that into different contexts. No, nobody is repeating Shakespeare.
So you would argue that this isn't a Shakespearean-based story?
Actually, no, because like you said, it's not a tragedy. The worlds aren't that different. The other characters totally minor, and there's really Shakespeare would often set up different plots throughout, subplots that you could focus on and different peripheral stories that didn't necessarily have to do with the plot itself, but there was more richness to all of it because the characters were constructed for a reason, or these, like the guys that are fighting, it's just like, it was like a kung fu film where it's just like a bunch of people that are just there for some action.
And then also it was really weird where he was like getting the absolute crap beat out of him, and then all of a sudden, because they hit the dad. Like, I like the idea of that he would try, but like, number one, that is massively disrespectful in general to like bring an elder into it, which I think is kind of the whole point, is that these people are like wildly like lacking in heart and character in order to be beating up on like a father. I mean, that's just insane to me. But also, there's no reality to that because he's getting the little crap beat out of him, and now all of a sudden he's a kung fu star. There's just a lot of like parts about Raj's character that I just could not understand and I could not get with. Like, he is massively
Can I just point?
Yeah.
I don't want to point out something. So that particular moment, I think the way it was meant to be seen is that he's not fighting. He's always been able to. I think the idea was his character could have fought back and won the battle at any point in time. He's sort of at that point, his character was so disheartened and he didn't want to. He almost was like, no, because I realized this, that I've seen this movie so many times. So this is something that growing up, obviously you don't catch a lot of the subtext until you are a certain age in any movie. But throughout this movie, the main character Raj is trying to get the respect of his dad, and one of his goals, or the main goal, is he doesn't want to elope with Simran. He wants Simran's dad to kind of be agreeable to their marriage. And so it's all about earning his respect and his approval. And that fight, he doesn't fight back until he feels like there is absolutely no way for him to earn that from his father anymore. And if I remember correctly, it was also something to do with his father being not his father, his father actually does show up, right? But also Simran's father, being there, and I think until he gets to the point where his own father gets hit, that he strikes back. But until then, he's happy to take a beating because he wants to earn the respect of Simran's father, not elope with Simran. I don't know if I'm addressing what you were talking about. But
I disagree with that because it definitely shows that the clear motivator for that is he does not fight back until they hit his father, and then it's an immediate fight back. So I think you are reading more into that than there is.
No, what I'm saying is he intentionally was taking a beating and not fighting back, not just like he then became an MMA star overnight, like in the split second. I think the idea is he always could fight back. He just chose not to until the point of until his own father got hit. So the point, him fighting back was not against Simran's father's wishes or going against him. It was more about protecting his own father. I think the motivation there changes in the scene. You see what I mean? It pivots. that's how
I mean, I
sort
get
of
what you're saying. Yeah. And I definitely agree with you about the storyline of like the whole sort of shift at one point is that he could elope with her. She wants to elope, but he wants to gain that respect, which I think is the only likable thing about this dude's character. At no point in the first half of the movie do I think he's likable truly to any extent.
This wasn't his most likable role.
He is so annoying.
Oh,
His
I think
character is
I know what you're
so
saying, but
annoying.
most Indian audiences would so disagree with you.
Fine.
Well,
why?
Miss Marvel
Is that like a
doesn't, because
weird
Miss Marvel
cultural
likes
thing?
Bazigar more, but I don't know. Yeah.
Like, what about that? Like, I don't get what is likable culturally
No,
or societal about
I
the
will
character.
say this, if you look at it objectively, if you look at it like from a writing standpoint,
I'm like folded my hands. I'm ready for this.
Right, Raj. Okay, this was a trend in the 90s, especially with Shahrukh Khan movies, where he used to play these characters that had this certain sense of toxic masculinity, and which I think culturally today, if you made this movie, the characterization of Raj would be different. It would be different because he's not as likable of a character by like the standards of filmmaking in general.
I don't think that's the issue at all.
He's annoying.
That's part of.
He's like a little kid.
By the way, here's an interesting tidbit. There's this like really famous line in the movie where he's like, "Bade bade deshon mein choti choti baatein hoti rehti hain." They can, like, which basically translates to, in big countries, like these kind of things happen, which is something that actually Barack Obama once upon a time quoted at an event that he was at. I don't know if it was in front of a lot of Indian audiences or something, but this movie like holds like there's a lot of like it's a quotable film. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. Andrew, you were going to say something about Raj.
I don't get the why. Like, make it make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me.
Honestly, yeah. This was not my favorite one to watch. Interestingly, I'd read that this wasn't the original vision of the movie.
So the context of this is the musical. So so start there. Like where you read this in a Variety article, right? So what is this in reference to? This is the director of the movie saying this, if I remember correctly. Right?
So his original idea was to have this be a clash of cultures as an American movie. This wasn't originally going to be a Bollywood film. It just happened that that's how it turned out. So the idea was to have it be an American and an Indian woman fall in love. And the culture clash would be a lot stronger because, like you said yourself, if you had to be, if you had your marriage arranged for you, that's just not how the West works. It would be kind of crazy for you.
Yeah.
So that already hit me more like what you said as a Romeo and Juliet type of story, because you can actually see a bigger culture clash here. There wasn't too much of a contrast between their worlds, in my view. And so, yes, as you mentioned, this is in the context of the idea that they're going to sort of revivify that old version of this as a Broadway musical. And honestly, I think that's a good call, because the similarities between Broadway musicals and Bollywood are very striking. And this is something that, it's light enough that it could be just sort of a fun jukebox kind of musical. The music
also, there's
could be
already
really
the music
interesting
there for it. Yeah.
Well,
so,
I think they would rewrite it. Because the plot changes a lot.
Yeah, but I do think the basis for it is already sort of there within not only the audience, but just the movie itself is like based off of like a musical form.
Yeah.
It's, by the way, this article is from a couple of years ago. Just to actually no, it's from last year.
Oh, is it out yet?
So it's they were playing until October 23rd. They played from September 1st to October 23rd at a theater, I think the Old Box Theater or something in San Diego. It was like and I think now I read on a New York tickets, but something where you can get theater tickets for New York theaters, that they are meant to at some point in the.
Coming from a musical standpoint, opening in San Diego versus opening in New York is a bad sign. That means they didn't have the money or the backing on any real level to open in New York.
Yeah. They're
That's
meant
not.
to. They're meant to open in New York soon. It's right now the ticket's not on sale, but it's coming soon apparently.
I'd be
But
curious to know whether or not they were workshopping it in New York, and then backing, like financial backing fell out or something, and so they couldn't afford to rent out a theater in New York. I'd be interested to
Possibly.
know about the basis of that, but like that's a bad.
I don't know about the
sign.
financial back. It did kind of strike me that it was going to open in San Diego, or it did open in San Diego first. But as I was going through and cross-referencing various articles talking about it, what I found out was that initially some of the articles, especially about the original run it looked like in San Diego, it was talking about the story being two Indian Americans, one of whom comes from like I think Brooklyn or New York somewhere within New York City, and has a very like liberal, like open, like westernized, again quote unquote westernized upbringing, and then the girl is from Chicago, and her family is very traditional, old school Indian conservative, but they were both
Yeah.
Indian American characters living in the U.S. And then the blurb I was reading about from the New York site talked about one character being specifically American and the other one being like an Indian American girl, like, and then the boy being American. So maybe they changed and evolved it a little bit. There were also some criticisms from some critics, like Indian actors and voice actors, stuff like that, who were talking about how why can't they just because they were pointing to the original movie and saying, if you're adapting it, why don't you keep it the way it was? We need more representation of Indian characters and actors on stage and on camera.
Well, let me push
than
back there,
changing it.
because if you did have an American lead in an otherwise Indian cast, wouldn't that sort of serve as the entrance point for Americans to watch it?
I do. I actually, I think
it'd
I'm on the
make it
camp
more
with
wildly
you,
marketable.
because
Yeah, that
Aditya
makes more
Chopra,
sense.
who's on screen here, he's the director of this movie, and this was, by the way, his first movie. I found out, DDLJ. So, and he always planned to kind of like make a couple of Bollywood movies and then move on to Hollywood. He mentions that he would have loved to have Tom Cruise play the role instead of Shahrukh Khan. He was the brother of Yash Chopra, who was a producer of the movie, and he was like a big legendary producer. He's passed away. Aditya Chopra is the younger brother. Anyway, but the point being, I think the story sort of evolved over time, and so it's changed. And I do agree that I think the contrast would have been better, because the original premise is stronger if the one character if they're not both Indian and just come
Yeah,
from
I think
different.
it. I think it leads to
Yeah.
a more because forgive me, just based off the ignorance. She's pretty Hindu, right?
She's from like
She's Hindu.
Punjab. I don't know if they specify if she's Hindu or if she's Sikh. Like I actually don't remember, honestly.
Because you see her praying quite a bit, and I just thought of her as being like very conservative Hindu, but I wasn't sure if that was accurate or not. And it definitely shows that he's like more of a more westernized, but I don't know. I think the character conflicts there are just not enough, and I don't think that his character himself has enough redeemable facets. Like, she kind of like falls in love with him when they get drunk and he doesn't sleep with her, and I was like, so we call that rape nowadays, so like I'm so happy he didn't rape you, like great, but like I don't think that's a basis for falling in love with him. But like so it's just the way they did it was like
it was more, it
no,
played out more like
no.
she fell in love with this person who was everything that she kind of dreamt of, like the life she dreamt of living, he lives. And so she kind of romanticized, and that's why she liked him so much. Whereas I think the back half of the movie is intended to kind of show that Raj also has this other side to him, which I don't know
But
how
the
well
thing
it
is,
comes across.
we don't see that until all of a sudden it's like, wow, he just got really mature all of a sudden. That's interesting. Like, he has these little like mature
There is like a
blurbs
flip the
of
switch moment when
rhetoric.
he shows up in India.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
you know, I won't
But we don't see any of
fault
that
him for
before.
that, because maybe what you're seeing is, you know, somebody's growth arc, and growth isn't, you know, as we see in movies, this like
Linear.
gradual but steady upward curve. Sometimes it really is, you know, you're growing up and you're making sense of things, and the things that you were doing, these childish things that were working for some time, suddenly don't, and you feel this emptiness, and you're like, why do I feel empty all of a sudden? I'm doing everything I've always done. And so then you try those things. I won't. Shahrukh Khan, he's a good actor. And I think that if that happened, you could fault it to editing or directing or whatever. But I do think there's some authenticity to bursts of maturity and bursts of immaturity, especially right out of college, which he was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Overall, it's like I want to root for them. I'm never walking into a movie like I want to hate this movie. It's not that I hate it, but I definitely do not like it.
You wouldn't be at the
scene was
Daily
weird.
Matinee for this.
No,
I
make it
did
make
like the
sense.
locales. I mean, they
Right.
shot a lot of this movie in Switzerland. They shot parts of it in London, and then they
They
shot
do
parts
actually
of it in
talk
India.
about that, how a big draw of the movie was like all of the different places that this was shot. And
Yeah.
again, like I can see how the growth arcs, especially for Simran and like what she wants, but also like wanting to honor her father. Like I think her character was more authentic and more believable and just overall like a great character. I had an issue with Raj's character the whole movie.
But
Her-
again, I think this is a story not so much about the clashing cultures, because again,
Yeah.
he's always saying, I want to do the Indian thing. I'm an Indian man. I don't, he tries to be as respectful as he can through the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think this really is a clash of the maturity gap that exists in men and women, no matter what culture you're from.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
that
but he's
there-
just so immature. Like
But-
he's so
but that's the thing. It's about him
yeah.
trying to figure out who he's going to be now that he doesn't have to be a student. I don't know.
She is really pretty though, y'all.
Oh yeah.
She's very pretty.
Maybe, I don't know. It could be that this is just, you're a woman, your experience is different, but I'm sure you've met plenty of annoying men who are your same age.
Yeah, I don't fall in love with them. I
Right?
tell them
Okay.
to go F
That's-
off. So
That's you. But
it's true.
you know, this is two people growing up, her sort of trying to explore life outside of the control of her family.
Yeah.
And she gets a little taste of that freedom. And that's the thing. It's not two people experiencing the same moment in their life. It's two people having completely different experiences that are coinciding, and deciding that they like that about each other, and they
Yeah.
want to make their lives compatible. And that is what a love story is. And that's something that I think romantic comedies get wrong, is that
Yeah.
the man and the woman are both feeling the exact same way.
Yeah.
Oh, nobody works for me. Nobody works for me either. I wish I could just meet someone. I wish I could just meet someone. Hey, we met. Yeah, we did. And you're perfect. You are. Wait, you're not perfect. Oh, you're not. And then they break up for a bit, then they get back together, and then everything's fine. And that's
True.
not how it works. This is a bit closer, because it takes into account all of those nuances.
That is definitely more authentic. And also, I mean,
I
like, especially now that I'm thinking about it more, like I enjoy her character. I think her character is very honest description of like what, and I can sort of speak to this as a woman too. Like I always want to try to do right by my family, but also like as a modern woman in life, like I want to do what I want to do. And there is a clashing in that. And there is sort of like a massive push to be of your family in a way that I think men are kind of like pushed out to be like, no, you get to go explore, do what you want, go adventure. But as a woman, like I tell people that I'm not super close with my family, and it's like, oh, why, honey? Like, are you okay? And it's like, yeah, like, of course, I love them. They're my family, but they're different from who I am and who I want to be. So I make distance there in that sense, but I always have this like guilt about it. So I can definitely feel for her character, and I do overall really enjoy her character too. It's really it's the other stuff that gets in the way of this story that kills me. I'm just like, oh, that's so cute. I love how he has aged spectacularly, but she looked basically the same.
Yeah, they both
looks
actually
great.
aged really well.
Yeah.
And this is 2015. This is 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, they still look pretty good. Like, they don't look their age, neither of them.
It was incredible. We love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So I mean, bottom line, was this my favorite Bollywood movie I've seen? No. Trying to think what would be in that case though.
Was it the Dang Dang or Bang Bang? Is it the correct
I didn't watch
version?
Bang Bang actually. No. Koi Mil Gya was like acid for me, and it was also
That
the
was
first one I ever
that's
saw.
such a fun movie to watch.
It was literally, my mind was blown and I had to like stop and
You
think
should,
for a while.
Angelina, you need to watch Koi Mil Gya. Where did we find that? That was on Z5.
I was like, no idea.
That was the
Send me
was
the
a-
link, y'all.
it was a
I'll get to it.
weird first one for me to see. I had never seen a Bollywood movie before it, and it's got aliens and
Should I make
like-
my mom watch one over Christmas?
uh-huh.
I don't know what her response will be.
That would be
honestly do
Koi
not
Mil
know.
Gya would be a good one because it's sort
That
of
lady is a savage, but then she's in love with those weird cheesy Lifetime movies, so she might love it. I don't
It's
know.
sort of it's
She'll like
based
some
on
of the
like
other ones.
E.T. It's sort
It's-
of
kind of, but that's
kind
not
of.
even doing
No,
it
no, I
justice.
know.
I'm like-
Dan, what was the other one with Shahrukh Khan we watched where it's in New York?
Kal Ho Na Ho.
Oh no, I think that one might be my favorite.
Oh, also an interesting comment was made. I said I watched a movie with a good friend of mine, and he was just like, I think I keep wanting to call him Shaka Khan. I'm so
Shahrukh
sorry.
Khan.
Shaka Khan. He might be the most famous actor in the world based
is,
off
yeah.
of not only his wide like popularity, but because India's population is so
Huge.
large that
Yep.
he is officially like the most famous man in the
Yeah.
world.
He's
Yeah.
also like
Do you
one of
think
the
that's true?
highest, if not the highest paid actor. in
That's
the
what you
world.
said. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know like how much he actually makes.
Oh, it's got to be up there, like in the millions. I mean, I think back in the 80s and 90s, Hollywood actors used to make more money because they would
did,
get like
yeah.
much bigger deals, because star power was a real big thing. Nowadays,
Yeah.
it's sort of diminished, and like you go to the movies for the characters, much less so than the actors playing those characters. Whereas in Bollywood, you still have that tradition. And
Yeah.
so these actors still hold much greater cultural clout than maybe a lot of Hollywood actors do today. Because like, I think it speaks to the pop culture of each of like, like the society. Like I think in American culture and then like anywhere where Hollywood is consumed, that culture is different than where Bollywood's and greater Indian cinema is today. Like the value and the clout it has within the larger culture. It speaks to that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, this is Kalahono, by the way. You can they shot a lot of
Oh,
it in
he's
New York.
from.
So
Isn't he from 3 Idiots or no?
the one on the left?
The actor? Yeah.
No. He's Saif Ali Khan. I think the one you're talking about is Amir
Oh.
Khan. They're all Khans. Like Khans kind of dominate Bollywood. It's a thing. But there you go. That's Manhattan. Yeah, there's the bull. It's like Wall Street. Anyway, so that was Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, or more commonly known or shortened as DDLJ, because for most people it's a mouthful. So I
Yeah.
love this movie. It's about as old as I am, and so I've always lived in a world where this movie existed, other than the first 9.5 months that I have no recollection of because I was too young to
Yeah.
remember anything.
For sure.
It is it's kind of like the Titanic of Bollywood, and I mean, it's not because there's similarities in terms of they're both love stories. They both have Shakespearean influences, even if they're not like that archetype per se. But
Yeah.
well, this was fun.
Well, yeah.
I thought it was. If you watch this in a theater, even like you go to the Marathi Mandir today, they do have a 15-minute intermission. So you should totally feel okay taking a break watching this, because 3 hours is a long time. Just letting
It
you know.
is.
Yeah.
It is like hardcore. I think it was like 3 hours and 9 minutes or something. I was like, whoa, cool. Good times.
Okay, so I know we talked about this last time, but we will, the next time we do a Bollywood movie, we won't just do watch a Bollywood movie alone. We will compare, just go with it with what's the name of the Indian movie that I mentioned?
You
the
would know
other
better
day?
than I would.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I know, I know. Why am I
That's
asking
your,
you guys? Uh,
it's like
Maine
that's
Pyar
your
Kyun Kiya?
forte.
Something like that. I think that's what the name of the movie is. Basically, one is Adam Sandler, one is another Khan, Salman Khan, who you have not, I don't think, seen any movies of yet. So there's like 4 or 5 different actors who are like all go by the last, they all have the last name Khan, and they're all like 5 of the top 10 actors of the last 50 years of Bollywood, like most popular
Alright.
and most successful.
Popular
Salman
Indian
Khan actually
accent.
has 3 of like, I think the top 5 highest grossing movies in Bollywood history or Indian cinema history star him.
Mhm.
So there's, anyway.
Cool. Sounds
It's a
good.
wrap.
Let me know.
on DDLJ.
Sounds good. Let us know if you've watched it and in the comments. And if you agree or disagree with one of us, all of us. It's not possible to agree with all of us, I don't think. But
Mm-mm.
thanks for watching and let us know what you think.